plague was moving through the cities like a slow fire killing. Tens of thousands of weak soldiers were dying not from swords, but from disease. Barbarian tribes were pressing against every border simultaneously. Political betrayal was everywhere, and the generals were losing battles they should have won. In the middle of all of this, one man sat down every night and wrote in a private journal that was never meant to be read by anyone. He didn't write about strategy. He didn't write about enemies. He didn't write about the empire falling. Apart around him, he wrote about his own mind. He wrote about how to stay calm, how to think clearly, how to remain unmoved when everything around him was moving. That man was Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, and he was terrified, not of the plague, not of the wars, of losing control of himself. What he wrote in that journal became one of the most studied texts in human history. Philosophers read it, military generals read it, presidents read it, psychologists read it, and most people still get it completely wrong. This is not a video about positive thinking. This is not a video about breathing, exercises, or morning routines. This is a video about the coldest, most precise psychological system ever developed for remaining completely functional when your world is actively burning. Stay with me, because what Marcus figured out in that journal is something that most people will spend their entire lives searching for and never find. Before we go any further, you need to understand something about Marcus Aurelius that most people skip over. He was not a philosopher who became powerful by accident. He was a man who was handed more responsibility than any human being should ever carry, and then spent the rest of his life learning how not to be destroyed by it. Born in 121 AD, adopted by Emperor Antoninus Pius at age 17, groomed for power from the moment he could hold a conversation. By the time he became emperor at age 40, he had watched Rome from the inside for over 2 decades. He knew exactly how ugly it was. He knew that the senators who smiled at him during the day were plotting against him at night. He knew that the advisors giving him counsel were calculating their own position in every word they said. He knew that. The people celebrating him in the streets would turn on him the moment things went wrong, and things went wrong constantly. The Antonine Plague historians estimate it killed between 5 and 10 million people across the Roman Empire. Entire legions were wiped out. Cities lost 1/3 of their population. The economic system that held the empire together began to crack. Then came the Germanic Wars, decades of brutal conflict on the northern frontier. Marcus spent years living in military camps on the front line, not in palaces. Then came the betrayal of his most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, who declared himself emperor while Marcus was still alive. And through all of it, Marcus Aurelius never publicly broke down, never made decisions from panic, never lost the cold, precise quality of his thinking. How? That is the question, and the answer is in the journal. Here is the first thing you need to understand about the Meditations. Marcus never called it that. He never gave it a title. He never intended to publish it. The Meditations was a private journal, written in Greek, not Latin, hidden from his court, his advisors, his family. These were notes he wrote to himself. Reminders, corrections, reframings of his own thinking when his thinking began to drift toward panic or anger or despair. In other words, it was a psychological maintenance manual for staying operational under extreme pressure. Think about what that means. The most powerful man in the world felt he needed to sit alone every night and talk himself back from the edge. Not because he was weak, but because he understood something that most people never learn. The mind is not automatically on your side. Left unmanaged, the mind will catastrophize. It will amplify threats. It will spiral into scenarios that have not happened and may never happen. It will waste the energy you need for the actual problem on imaginary versions of the problem. Marcus understood this at a level so deep that he built an entire daily practice around correcting it. And the system he developed is something you can use starting today in whatever situation you are currently facing, whatever is going wrong in your life right now. Let's go through it. Marcus wrote this in the Meditations, and I want you to sit with it. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Simple words, profound mechanism. Here is what he was actually saying. There are two categories of things in the world. Things you control and things you don't. And almost every source of anxiety, panic, and mental breakdown comes from treating the second category as if it belongs in the first. Your body gets sick. You cannot control that. You can control how you treat it, how you rest, whether you see a doctor, but the sickness itself, not yours. Someone betrays you. You cannot control that. You can control whether you saw the signs, how you respond, what you do with the information. But their decision to betray, not yours. The economy collapses. The relationship ends. The deal falls through. The opportunity disappears, not yours. Marcus lost 10 million subjects to a plague he could not stop. He could not control the plague. He could control how resources were allocated. He could control how the military was reorganized. He could control how food was distributed. He could control the quality of his own thinking in the middle of the crisis, so he focused there, exclusively there. And this is where most people fail in a crisis. They spend 90% of their mental energy on the category of things. They cannot control the unfairness of it, the timing of it, the people responsible for it, the alternative versions of reality where it didn't happen, and they spend almost nothing on the one category that actually matters, the category that is entirely theirs. What can I actually do right now? What is in my control right now? What decision can I make right now that moves things forward? That is the first shift, and it sounds obvious until you are inside the crisis, and you realize how violently your brain resists it. Marcus practiced this shift every single day in the journal. He would write down what was happening. Then he would force himself to separate it into the two categories. Then he would release the first category completely and direct all energy into the second. Not because it felt good, because it worked. Marcus had a specific meditation he used when situations felt too large, too overwhelming, too close to see clearly. He called it the view from above. He would deliberately imagine himself rising above his body, above the room, above the city, above the empire, above the earth itself, looking down at the entire situation from a distance so great that the thing that felt catastrophic a moment ago now looked very small. And from that distance, he would ask himself one question: in the context of all of time and all of space, how significant is this moment? Not to dismiss it, not to minimize real pain or real problems, but to recalibrate the scale at which he was experiencing it. When you are inside a crisis, your nervous system treats it as if it is the only thing that has ever existed, the only thing that ever will exist. It fills your entire field of vision. It floods your body with stress chemistry. It makes 10-year problems feel like end-of-the-world events. The view from above breaks that illusion by force. Marcus wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." He was not saying ignore the future. He was saying stop letting an imagined catastrophic future consume your present decision-making. Here is a practical example of how this works. Imagine you lose your job today. Your nervous system fires as if you are dying. Threat detected, full alarm. The stress response cannot distinguish between a predator and a termination letter. Now apply the view from above. You are one person, in one city, in one country, in one era, in a species that has existed for 200,000 years on a planet that has existed for 4 billion years, in a universe that has existed for 14 billion years. This moment of job loss, as painful as it is not the end of the story. It is not even the end of the chapter. It is a sentence, a paragraph at most. From that perspective, what is the actual next step? Not the catastrophic imagined future. The next actual step: make a call, update a document, have a conversation. Take one action inside the category of what you control. The view from above does not make your problems disappear. It makes them the correct size, and problems that are the correct size can be solved. Problems that are 10 times their real size cannot. Marcus used this practice before every major decision during the plague years. He literally wrote himself out of the ceiling of panic and back, down into the ground of what could be done. That is the second principle. This is the one that most people cannot believe. When they first encounter it, Marcus wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that again. What stands in the way becomes the way, not despite the obstacle. Through it. Because of it, this is not motivational rhetoric. This is a precise psychological mechanism that Marcus understood at a level that modern psychology is only beginning to catch up to. Here is the mechanism. When something goes wrong, your brain has two options. It can treat the obstacle as evidence that the goal is impossible, which triggers retreat, shutdown, depression, helplessness, or it can treat the obstacle as information, as data, as a force that, when understood, can be redirected into forward movement. The first option is the default. The second option is a skill. And like any skill, it must be trained. Marcus trained it by forcing himself to find the utility in every setback. Not the silver lining, which is passive and vague, the actual utility, the specific way in which this specific problem contains the material for its own solution. Let me give you a real historical example. During the Antonine Plague, the Roman armies were devastated. Entire legions were losing men not to battle, but to disease. The military, the most powerful fighting force the ancient world had ever seen, was being hollowed out from the inside. Most emperors would have retreated from the borders, pulled back, played defense, and waited for the plague to pass. Marcus did something different. He looked at the obstacle and found its hidden material. He recruited Germanic tribesmen, the same people pushing against Rome's borders into the Roman legions. He restructured the military around smaller, faster, more adaptable units that could operate effectively with fewer men. He used the crisis to modernize an institution that had grown. Rigid and complacent, the plague created the conditions that forced the innovation. The obstacle became the fuel. In your own life, this principle works exactly the same way. The business that failed taught you the specific thing you needed to know to build the one that succeeds. The relationship that ended exposed the patterns in yourself that the next relationship requires you to have changed. The rejection letter from the opportunity you wanted most redirected you to the thing you were actually supposed to build. You cannot see this in the middle of the crisis. Marcus could not see it in the middle of his, but he trusted the mechanism enough to keep applying it even when he could not yet see the result. That is the third principle. The obstacle is not in the way. The obstacle is the way. This is the darkest and most powerful of all the principles, and it is the one that separates people who are merely resilient from people who are genuinely untouchable. Marcus wrote about the concept that later philosophers would call amor fati, love of fate. Not acceptance of fate, not tolerance of fate, love of it. Here is what that means in practice. Everything that has happened to you, every loss, every failure, every betrayal, every crisis, every moment of pain, everything that went wrong at the worst possible time was not something that happened to you, it was something that happened for you. Or more precisely, it was simply something that happened, and your relationship with it is a choice. Most people spend enormous amounts of energy in a state of internal argument with reality. This should not have happened. It is not fair. I did not deserve this. Things should be different. And that argument is always lost, because reality does not negotiate. What happened, happened. The argument against it consumes energy that could be redirected into response. Amor fati is the complete elimination of that argument, not resignation, not passivity, not giving up, the complete refusal to waste a single unit of energy on wishing things were different than they are. Marcus lost his children. Several of them died young. His wife was rumored to have been unfaithful. His most trusted general betrayed him. His empire was being eaten alive by plague and war simultaneously, and in the journal he wrote not with bitterness about these things, but with a strange, cold clarity, an acceptance that was not weakness, but precision. He had calculated the cost of fighting reality and found it greater than the cost of accepting it and moving. Here is how to apply this practically. The next time something goes wrong, instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Ask, what does this make possible? Not what does this prevent? Not what does this cost me? What does this make possible that was not possible before? The job loss makes entrepreneurship possible. The relationship ending makes a better one possible. The failure makes the correction that leads to success possible. This is not optimism. Optimism is hoping things will get better. Amor fati is their cognition that things are already exactly as they need to be for the next chapter to begin. The willingness to love the fire because the fire is forging something. Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire on earth from inside a burning world, and he never stopped, because he had decided that the burning world was not his enemy. It was his material. This one will feel uncomfortable. Be good. Discomfort is usually where the most important things live. Marcus was obsessed with death, not in a morbid way, in a precise, strategic way. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He practiced what the Stoics called memento mori. Remember that you will die every morning, without exception. He would contemplate his own death, not to make himself sad, to make himself clear. Here is the psychological mechanism. Most anxiety comes from treating small things as large things, from assigning enormous weight to events and outcomes and opinions that, when viewed against the backdrop of mortality, are almost weightless. Someone criticized your work. You are going to die. Does their criticism matter? The deal fell through. You are going to die. Is this the thing you want to be consumed by? The relationship is difficult. You are going to die. Is the energy you are spending on resentment the best use of the time you have? This is not nihilism. This is calibration. Marcus used the awareness of death, not to make him passive, but to make him ruthlessly selective about where he directed his energy and attention. The awareness that time was finite made every moment of panic, every spiral of anxiety, every argument with reality, an obvious waste he could not afford. And here is where it gets really interesting. When you genuinely internalize your own mortality, something unexpected happens to your relationship with chaos. It stops being threatening, because the worst thing that can happen in any crisis is not the loss of the job, not the end of the relationship, not the failure of the business. The worst thing is the loss of your life. And once you have fully accepted that this will eventually happen, everything else becomes manageable by comparison. Marcus faced actual death every day. Plague was all around him. Assassins existed. War was constant. And instead of being paralyzed by the proximity of death, he used it as a focusing lens. If this might be my last year, what decision matters? If this might be my last month, what matters? If this might be my last week? The memento mori practice does not make you pessimistic. Marcus wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." 3 words. Entire philosophy. Here is what he understood that most people do not. When everything is going wrong, the mind does not stay in the present. It travels. It goes into the past to replay what went wrong. Who is responsible? What could have been done differently? It goes into the future to construct catastrophic scenarios, to imagine worst cases, to rehearse disasters that have not yet occurred. And while the mind is traveling, the present moment, the only moment where anything can actually be done, goes unattended. Marcus had a specific practice for this. When he noticed his mind leaving the present, he would ask himself one question: what is the one thing I can do right now? Not tomorrow, not next week, not after the situation resolves. Right now, in this moment, with what I currently have. And then he would do that one thing. This sounds almost insultingly simple, but watch what it does to a crisis. When the plague was killing people by the thousands, Marcus could not save them all. He could not reverse what had already happened. He could not prevent ever future death. But he could make one decision in this moment about resource allocation, and then one decision about troop movement, and then one decision about food distribution, not one present moment action, then the next, then the next. This is how enormous problems are actually solved, not by solving them all at once, which is impossible, but by making the one correct, present moment move and then doing it again. The crisis always looks unsolvable from a distance, because you are trying to solve the whole thing at once. It becomes solvable the moment you confine yourself to the present and ask only, what is the one thing I can do right now? Marcus wrote this to himself constantly in the journal, not because he forgot it, but because the mind requires repetition to override its default behavior of leaving the present. Every time you notice your mind in the past or the future during a crisis, return it. One present moment action, then the next. That is the 6th principle. This one is going to challenge you. Marcus wrote, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are this way because they cannot tell good from evil. Pause. Most people read that and think it is pessimistic. They are wrong. It is the most liberating thing a person in a position of power can internalize. Here is what Marcus was actually doing. He was removing the element of surprise from human behavior. He was refusing to be caught off guard by the fact that people are flawed, self-interested, inconsistent, and sometimes actively destructive. Because here is the truth about staying calm when everything is going wrong. A significant portion of what goes wrong is caused by other people. Betrayals, incompetence, selfishness, poor decisions made by people around you that create consequences you have to manage. and most people respond to this with outrage, hurt, and the specific torture of feeling that people should be better than they are. Marcus eliminated that torture by deciding in advance that people would be exactly as they are. He was not cynical about this. He did not stop caring about people or stop trying to lead them well. He simply stopped being surprised or destabilized by the reality of human nature. When his general, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor, while Marcus was still alive, Marcus did not respond with rage. He responded with a letter offering forgiveness and calling Cassius back. And when Cassius was assassinated before Marcus could reach him, Marcus reportedly mourned not being able to demonstrate the mercy he had planned. He was not caught off guard by betrayal. He had already made peace with the fact that betrayal was possible, and that peace gave him the ability to respond strategically rather than emotionally. In your own life, the people who are failing you, disappointing you, betraying you, competing with you, undermining you, they are behaving exactly as human beings behave, not as you wish they would. As they do, the moment you accept this completely, you stop spending energy on outrage and start spending it on strategy. You cannot change what people are. You can only change how you position yourself relative to what they are. That is the seventh principle. This is the principle that ties everything together. The one Marcus returned to more than any other. He called it the inner citadel. The image is this: inside every person there is a fortress, a place that external events cannot reach, cannot damage, cannot occupy, a place of complete internal sovereignty that exists regardless of what is happening on the outside. Marcus wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. Here is the mechanism. Everything around you can be taken. Your money, your status, your relationships, your health, your reputation, your empire. But no one can enter the inner citadel without your permission. No one can take your judgment. No one can take your ability to choose your response. No one can take the quality of your own thinking." Marcus Aurelius' ultimate weapon, not his armies, not his political power, not his wealth, his unassailable internal sovereignty. And here is the dark truth about it. Building the inner citadel is not comfortable work. It requires you to take full responsibility for your own psychological state in every circumstance. It requires you to stop looking outward for reasons you're inner. Life is chaotic, and start looking inward for the disciplines that bring it to order. Most people do not want to do this work. It is easier to blame the circumstances, the people, the timing, the unfairness of it all. Marcus had more reason than almost any human who has ever lived to blame his circumstances. He was handed an empire in the middle of its most catastrophic era and expected to hold it together. And in the journal, he barely writes about the external problems at all. He writes about his thinking, his responses, his discipline, his internal standards, because he understood that the external world was always going to produce chaos. That was not the variable he could control. The variable he could control was the fortress inside him that the chaos could not enter. The inner citadel is built one decision at a time. Every time you choose your response instead of reacting from instinct, every time you confine yourself to the present instead of spiraling, every time you separate what you control from what you don't, every time you find the utility in the obstacle instead of the unfairness, each of those moments is a brick. And over time, the citadel becomes something that nothing can breach. How to actually apply this? Here is the practical framework. 8 principles. 1 system. Starting today, the first principle is the dichotomy of control. When something goes wrong, write it down and separate it into 2 columns. What you control and what you don't. Release the second column completely. Direct everything into the first. The second principle is the view from above. When the crisis feels too large, deliberately expand your perspective until the problem is the correct size. Then ask what the next action is. The third principle is obstacle as fuel. Ask not what the obstacle is preventing, but what it is making possible. Find the material inside the setback. The fourth principle is remove the argument with reality. Stop spending energy on wishing things were different. Ask instead what this makes possible. The fifth principle is memento mori. Remember that you will die. Use that awareness to calibrate what actually deserves your energy and what does not. The sixth principle is the present moment. Every time the mind travels to past or future during a crisis, return it. Ask only what the one thing you can do right now is, then do it. The seventh principle is accepting human nature. Decide in advance that people will behave as people behave. Remove the element of surprise from betrayal, disappointment, and selfishness. Respond strategically instead of emotionally. The eighth principle is the inner citadel. Build it one decision at a time. Understand that the only thing that cannot be taken from you is the quality of your own judgment and the sovereignty of your own response. These are not affirmations. They are not feel-good ideas. They are a daily operational system developed by a man who was managing actual civilizational collapse. Marcus Aurelius woke up every morning with the weight of the world on his shoulders. People dying by the millions. Armies failing. Borders collapsing. Betrayal from every direction, and he sat down and wrote in his journal, not about the empire, about his mind, because he understood something that most powerful people never learn. The external world will always produce chaos. The only variable that matters is the quality of the mind that faces it. Here is what I want you to take from this. Marcus Aurelius was not calm because nothing was wrong. He was calm because he had built something inside himself that the wrong things could not reach. That is the distinction. And it is everything. The people around you who seem unmoved by chaos, who make clear decisions when everything is falling apart, who never seem to lose their composure no matter what happens. They are not wired differently than you. They are not lucky. They are not born with something you were not. They have built the citadel. And the citadel is built not in the good times. It is built in exactly the moments you're in right now. The moments when everything is going wrong and the mind wants to spiral and the emotions want to take over and the circumstances are screaming at you to react. Every time you choose principle over reaction in those moments, you lay another brick. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire reign laying bricks. In a plague, in a war, in a betrayal. In the specific cold darkness of a man who carried more than any person should carry and still showed up every day and still made the next right decision and still wrote in his journal at night. Not about his enemies or his losses, but about the quality of his own thinking. The empire eventually fell, but the journal survived. Because what Marcus built inside himself was more durable than marble, more lasting than empire, more powerful than any army he commanded. It was a mind that could not be broken by circumstance. That is what is available to you, starting now. Starting with the next decision you make. Starting with the moment you choose to confine yourself to the present and ask only what you can do right now, not what you've lost, not what might happen, not how unfair it is. What can you do right now? That is the entire doctrine of Marcus Aurelius summarized in 7 words. And it is enough. If this changed how you think about calm and power, subscribe to Shadow Doctrine. New videos every week. The kind of knowledge they don't teach in school. Comment below the one principle that hit you hardest. The old way of thinking is dead. Now build the citadel.